time for a brand new season of Friday Night Primetime. We'll make our way around the iRacing universe to see what you, our iRacing community, has in store for us. Today we begin with a Friday night preview, in some ways, of the action coming tomorrow. On the eve of the iRacing 6 Hours of the Glen, powered by VCO, we make our way to the IMSA iRacing series for what is bound to be a 45 minutes filled with chaos. Hello everyone, Arjuna Kenki Party alongside with Will Chadwick to get you underway for this season. Do not forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to RaceSpotTV/timing. Will, I am so excited, not just about today, but about tomorrow as well. 6 hours of relentless sprint racing action in many ways, introducing a brand new car to the iRacing world.
Absolutely, it's going to be really fantastic to see how the racing gets under tonight and also tomorrow. This is the 47th IMSA race of the week, and as you can see on your screen, you've got a bit of the balance of performance. Of course, there's been no changes, I believe, to the GTP class. However, you can see that the Porsche, the new one, the 911 GT3R, the 992 variant, has had quite a heavy balance of performance update, and that's going to be interesting to see what the teams choose tomorrow.
Balance of performance are 3 words, 3 letters once you abbreviate them down that you always inevitably end up talking about, and I'm sure we'll have 6 hours to talk about that tomorrow. I get the sense BMW, maybe Ferrari, Mercedes going to be what we see for the most part, but again, now we've got 2 GTP machines. Going to be interested to see the different ways that they develop speed. Where do we head? We head to upstate New York to a track that hosts the 3rd round of the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Endurance Cup, and elevation change not necessarily shown on this track map, but Will, it's fast, it's flowing, and with 3 classes of competition for the first time in 2 years, this might be an interesting one.
It's certainly going to be an interesting race, Arjuna. Key challenges of this track is always the track temperature. It's always soaring high. It's always really hard for these drivers to keep the tyres under control and in that operating range. It's going to be really interesting to see how the teams play out the strategy and how they manage their tyres tomorrow and today.
We'll get a preview of what the strategy I think is going to be like today in terms of how much the drivers are able to push, but scorching track temperatures very much the norm here in upstate New York. Let's talk about those track temperatures very quickly, with qualifying going to come to an end very shortly. GTD machines, I should say, are about to finish up their 2nd lap, but not really too many changes going on there. Weather conditions relatively cool, all things considered, Will, only 44 degrees Celsius.
Oh, that's a really, really cool day here at Watkins, Glen. Although maybe we'll be seeing hotter temperatures tomorrow. We've got a pretty large, little bit of cloud cover on the circuit, which is potentially keeping those track temperatures a little bit down, but it's certainly going to make it easier for our drivers out there today. But believe you me, 44 degrees is still hot.
Yes, I think I've seen up to 70-ish on iRacing. Interlagos, I think, tends to be where it's the warmest, closely followed by Watkins, Glen at times. You can see it's George's Nader 127.3 in the GTP class that sits on top in qualifying. Aaron Vasquez, who's our highest I-rated driver, 132.1 in the LMP2 class. Only half a tenth clear, though, of that number 7 machine. It's Josh White, a.k.a. Bosch Thompson, that sits in a front of a red line 1 and 2 in GTD. Here comes Taylor Barnard to the line to set what will be his only attempt in qualifying, which will slide him up to the 8th position. But we are seeing right now it's BMW, and then Porsche at the front.
Yeah, that Porsche seems to be really good over a hot lap, but I know across a lot of teams the concern lies with the race, with its race pace. Of course, a Porsche being rear-engined, there's not a lot of weight over that front axle, and even with the setup changes you can make, it can tend to wear its front tyres a lot more, which makes it hard to keep the pace across the stint.
Well, qualifying's only one part of any race, and in a 45-minute dash, it's actually relatively important. The first cycle through traffic is always the most chaotic, and, well, I think we're in for some drama. We're ready to roll here in Watkins Glen for the first night of Friday Night Primetime in 2023, Season 3. Let's head down to the starting grid and see how they'll line up. So it's Georges Nader in the distinctive Falcon colors that will bring us to the green. He'll be alongside the Arnage competition, number 29 of Thibaut Prévost. Pedro Sanchez-Albert, who will represent BMW Bank today and tomorrow, lines up alongside Timo Roorda on row 2 with Matthew Roberts. And then Will Line in the Arnbrew colours, 5th and 6th positions. Rolling from 7th, it's Cy Andra. He's got Daniel Croft in the Pearson's car on the outside of row number 4, as we see a bit of mix-up, some BMWs, some Cadillacs in this GTP field. Norbert Tamas and then Michael de Turk complete your top 10, with Matthias Pentela and then Alexander Delatraz back in the 12th position. Still got a handful more GTPs. Tomoki Hirose, Julian Ribolo, Connor McKellen, Dan Drakia, and then Thomas Masner will round out your 17-strong GTP contingent. 3 BMWs, though, at the front of that. No such dramas here in the LMP2. It's just Delaras to talk about. Aaron Vasquez, the fastest of them all in the Altus car, but it's got the Coffin Dancers and Jesse Hilayo to watch for. Also Sasha Gorla in a Movano-coloured car with Kuba Kwiatkowski in the number 17 along his outside. The second Coffin Dancers car rolls from 5th, Christopher Wiame on his outside. Alistair Catchpole, Niels van Handel, 7th and 8th positions with Adam State and then Jonas Koberstein through the top 10. Thomas Ferry, Lucas Juritz, and then as well Raphael Bristolin, Martin Hartz Riesel, Daniel Hart Riesel in what I would assume are family cars, and then Thomas King, 16 Dallara LMP2s. Last but not least, with the field beginning to roll on a full pace lap, let's run down the GTDs where it's Redline 1 and 2, Josh Thompson, Ollie Steinbratten will lead us to the green, and then the 992 generation Porsche of Fabio Unvedrus, Matthias Gerard, and then Vil Evenin along in the top 5 with Felix Voter rolling from 6th position. It'll be Kimo Rovan-Pera, Taylor Barnard, Daniel Morphy, and then Juan Hosso through the rest of your top 10 with Ilya Krivo Kishchin and then Philip Herold completing your top 12. Marcin Gadinsky, Ryan van de Gerp, Andre Heinrich, Euro Vigelia, and then Roby Ferrari rounding out the rest of your field. Boy, was there some butchering going on there, Will. At least you could laugh at my expense.
I would absolutely salute you on those pronunciations or attempted pronunciations. I can't even say the pronunciations word. But yeah, 50 cars here on the grid. It's going to be really interesting to see how everyone gets along. Quite a large gap being left between the fields by the drivers. And I think that it's going to be really interesting seeing how this field develops and how we see them deal with the traffic. Of course, these prototypes have got quite a large speed advantage in the corners compared to your GTD machinery, and that can often cause problems, as we've seen many a time in endurance racing on iRacing and many other services. So it's going to be interesting to see that first run through traffic and see what happens.
Like you mentioned, big gaps being left, but they all will go at the same time, and so that's going to be, I think, something we're going to have to keep our eye on. The GTP cars already heading off down into the boot section, LMP2 cars just heading off into the bus stop. Meanwhile, the red line cars that will lead us to the green in GTD just rising the top of the S's. Starts here at Watkins Glen are always pretty crazy, and we've seen our fair share of drama over the years as well, Will, both in the real and virtual worlds.
Oh, absolutely. Watkins is definitely one for a bit of drama. It's often one that you either like or don't like in terms of the iRacing special event calendar. It always reminds me a little bit of Petit Le Mans. It kind of gives the same vibe in my mind. Maybe it's because they're just both American circuits, but it's going to be interesting seeing how the drivers deal with this, and also to see kind of what happens in this short sprint compared to tomorrow's endurance race.
No. Tomorrow's not an endurance race. 6 hours is short, and there are some teams that are doing it with 3 drivers. So I get the sense that it's going to be a sprint for many of the teams. Let's just remember what my motto is. Traffic management so important. GTP stands for I'm going to pass. LMB2 is let me pass, and GTD stands for going to die. You said you either love it or hate it, though, on the iRacing special event calendar. Which side of that fence do you end up falling on?
Hey, I don't like it. I'm sorry. Wow. Crucify me.
So
I don't like track temps being high.
So you're not racing tomorrow?
No, I'm not racing though.
So you're as toasted as the tires are going to be here today.
Pretty much. I'm completely washed.
Here we go, though. Again, 45 minutes thrown onto the clock. This is a sprint. It's a preview of what we will see tomorrow with drivers fighting for physical trophies. We're ready to go for Friday night preview. George's Nutter picks up the throttle and gets us underway in upstate New York. As we mentioned, though, it's not just them racing immediately through the penultimate corner, side by side for second spot in the LMP2 class. Thibaut Prévost having to be very careful as he loses not one but two positions as they rise up through the S's. The Coffin Dancer machine looks for the lead in the LMP2 class as they make contact across the line.
Yeah, but a pretty chaotic start, but clean for the time being here in LMP2 and GTP. We've not really seen much of the GTD class behind, but it's going to be interesting to see how this slipstream battle kind of develops over the course of this start. We're watching the GTDs down to turn number 1 now, and it seems to be Redline away at the front.
They are just coming across the line with the GTPs already heading off in towards the boot. GTD's relatively calm, and I think that's important. Not sure what happened with Aaron Vasquez, but he is not running on track anymore, and so that is why we saw the Coffin Dancer's car across the line fighting for the lead. We'll try and get an update on what happened there. But still, as the GTP cars wind their way now towards the end of the boot section, it is George's Nato that leads from Pedro Sanchez Albert, albeit with some technical issues.
Yeah, there's always a connection that you have to worry about sometimes. That's a relatively clean start in your GTP field. I find it quite interesting, the car selection at choice, because I feel like a lot of people were really liking the Cadillac. However, I think the familiarity of this BMW hybrid V8 is proving fruitious for some people.
Aaron Vasquez has disconnected, unfortunately, so technical issues drop him from the field and will leave in his wake a potential tussle for that LMP2 victory. That one complete, and seemingly no major drama outside of Vasquez because every other car is still going without anyone losing more than 4 positions through the field. Your point on the BMW and the Cadillac should be pointed towards the BMW IMSA Cup, where we came a couple of weeks ago, Will, with the BMW M Hybrid, as that was Thibaut Prévost getting very, very loose.
Yeah, I think you ended up in the barrier. Prévost's return to the pit lane, that's disaster for the Arnage competition driver at the start of this race. I'm not sure if it was a bad landing or a snap over the exit of the inner loop, but that's a disaster at the start of this IMSA race.
It's kind of one of the major talking points, though, the bumps at that curb and how you take them, how much risk you want to take. Before we take a look at that, let's cycle back to drama at the back of the GTP field, where the likes of Hirose and Ribelot just were tripping over one another and a little bit clumsy, all things considered. Now let's check out, though, what happened in the pink and white machine. It's on the exit where you don't tend to see the car getting that loose, all things considered, but you'll just see on the entry how it gets unsettled.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. Actually, I think a lot of it is the catching of the grass. Of course, when you're putting 2 wheels on the grass, you're suddenly losing a lot of grip on one half of the car, and it just caused the car to go into a little bit of a slide. And then you know, with these types of cars, they're so set up so perfectly for ultimate performance that they can just snap like that, and it's really unfortunate for Prévost.
We did see contact across the line, but it is Jesse Hilario who will take the point in LMP2 and lead from Sasha Gorla and then Villa Huttunen, 1, 2, and 3 as the Coffin Dancers. Looking quite strong for tomorrow. One of the talking points that I'm going to be keeping my eye on is the fact that in this LMP2 class, we've seen the Apex Racing team, specifically Elvis Rankin and Michele Costantini, win both of our previous 2 VCO Grand Slams. They want to make it 3 in a row. Who can challenge them? Because LMP2 has maybe been the nuttiest of the classes so far this year.
100%. I think it was always one of those classes that saw so much attention before the return of the top class here, the GTP cars in IMSA and throughout endurance racing. We had a little bit of a hiatus at the ending of the LMP1 era, and I think that car, the LMP2, almost took top class honours in terms of a car that everyone used. So I think this year it's been primed for shake-ups, and Apex have been really dominant in that class. We saw them really dominant maybe in GT3 last year, but it really feels like this year they've made the LMP2 car their own.
Here's a half-hearted look to the inside of the Movano entry, but the undercut car going to continue to watch from its vantage point in 4th. There's no major changes here. Check back in with GTDs as they cycle in through the bus stop. Think we've just seen a potential swap around inside of the top 10 in this class, with Matteo Gerard getting up in front of Fabio Unvadrus, but Taylor Barnard got the best of the opening lap out of anyone in this field, up 5 positions to third, where he's trying to chase down the red line cars, who have built up a 1.1 second advantage, not totally out of drafting range.
Very, very close to the edge of drafting, like you mentioned. A fantastic start by Barnard, the real-life FIA F3 driver on the service here today, and a very, very competent sim driver as well. It'll be interesting to see. I think a bit of that comes down to how they qualify these cars these days. A lot of the emphasis is on getting that one really fast lap. Everyone's kind of going for that one-shot qualifying to have the tyres in just the best condition possible. And sometimes you make mistakes. And when that happens, you might be out of position in qualifying. And I would certainly say that seems what happened to Barnard in our qualifying session today. We
are going to see traffic start to be a factor, by the way, but as Sasha Gorla loses a bunch of time to Hilario at the front of the LMP2 field as they battled for second into the bus stop chicane, I'm going to be curious how it's going to play out for some of these drivers that continue to fight in traffic. The Cadillac's proving to be very much in the mid-pack of this GTP field for the time being, but that's going to be one of those things that we'll see develop a lot more over time, over the course of the season, Will, is how each car develops its speed and which tracks suit the BMW and which tracks, suit the Cadillac.
Yeah, very interesting. I was having a look across kind of the fastest qualifying laps of the week, and it was top and tail by Cadillacs. However, the rest of them were BMWs. It's an interesting factor because it feels like both the cars are incredibly close together as we're already getting GTP traffic through the GTDs and already kicking off a little bit.
Lights flashing, the universal sign of let me pass because I'm coming through. Fortunately, we're not seeing the LMP2 cars mixed up here as well. Challenge for the lead. Pedro Sanchez Albert dives to the inside of that Falcon liveried car, and the BMW bank machine slides to the point.
What a move there by Pedro Sanchez Albert. That is class personified, just kind of knowing exactly what he needed to do in traffic, and that BMW bank car making a crucial move to start off this traffic sequence, as it's always better to lead in this scenario.
This is also scary at times as well, because you've got GT3s trying to figure things out in and amongst themselves, while GTP's duking with relatively full cars in terms of fuel, fresh tires as well, so they have the impetus to make dives like that one. Big send behind Will Line by Norbert Tamas as he tries to hold on to the back of the Irn-Bru car. You can just see the desperation from some as they try to hold on to track position.
The quickest way to make up time in one of these top class cars is by passing GTDs and slower class cars effectively, but that often causes carnage. A bit of desperation getting in there, but no one dead yet. So maybe your acronym is not quite coming true so far.
Not yet, but here we go, up in towards the bus stop chicane. There is a slow car at the back through the S's. Couldn't quite pick out who that was. Well, was that Michael de Turk? It's a beaten up BMW M Hybrid that's back on pit lane, so maybe it was. But as the GTD leaders finally start to see the final GTP slide on through, I think we survived relatively calmly through that first cycle of traffic.
Yeah, well, I think I definitely jinxed it a little bit there, as I believe we might have had a few GT3 casualties into the pit lane after what I can only presume is an incident up the S's. But in retrospect, it's been fairly good, and it's actually, I would say, closed up our top three in the GTD class quite a lot.
Yes, because Taylor Barnard is now right on the back of the red line, Gio. Pedro Sanchez Albert, like you said, it pays to lead into traffic, and so he has broken away. We're watching Matthew Roberts in 6th, holding Daniel Kraft-Sandra and Alexander Delatraz at bay as they head off to complete yet another lap. But let's not forget that we got 3 classes of competition, and that means that eventually these LMP2 cars will be the next up to run their way to the GTDs, and they're only probably a lap or 2 away from doing that. Let's look from up above, though, at how Michael de Turk found his way back in pit lane, and, well, there's a couple more GTD cars involved.
That's quite an interesting one, actually, as we look at it getting close through the acids. I'm surprised we didn't have any further casualties. But to be honest, what it looks like is the first car to have an incident is that Porsche. Does he get hit maybe by the Cadillac up the hill? Potentially. It looks maybe like a small contact, and then just a case of people panicking a little bit under the cars spinning around them and not quite being aware of the surroundings, causing the further incidents.
That could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
Watkins Glen is the only track where I have seen, actually that's not true anymore, for a long time, was the only track that I had seen iRacing automated cautions actually fly, much like they do on ovals at every track. And so those are situations where traditionally you would not be surprised to see a caution fly. Top three, like Will mentioned, have broken away. It's not Josh White. We're going to have to make fun of him a lot for this, because using a Smurf account in a broadcasted race, I don't know about that one.
Shame on him. Shame on him. But then again, we can say the same about Taylor Barnard. Let's not be too critical here. Barnard's also on a
Yes,
Smurf
agreed.
account. So, potentially they should have made their liveries blue to reflect this.
Maybe they should make their liveries RaceSpot liveries.
Good point.
Yeah, if you're going to use a Smurf account, we do not condone second accounts, but yes, RaceSpot liveries will always go a ways to making us benefit. Now here's a battle between Pearsons and Daniel Kraft as the Cadillacs try and get past a rather stagnant BMW. Matthew Roberts tucked up in that 6th position. And I haven't really been able to drive many of these cars up to speed because I'm not that quick anymore. It turns out rust is real. But the Cadillac drives quite interestingly. I really liked it.
I really liked it as well. A big key distinction between the Cadillac and the BMW is the Cadillac allows you to use brake migration. If you don't know what brake migration is, it just means that you can change your bias throughout a corner, which, to be honest, could fix a lot of problems that people had with the BMW, because it had a tendency to lock the rears in a later stage of braking, and migration and setting up migration correctly for your brakes may improve that.
On board with Syandra, by the way, inside of this cockpit. Tight confines as per usual. Sasha Gorla in the LMP2 class has headed off to pit lane. I'm not exactly sure what has happened to him, but I will see if we can get word on that. I also haven't quite figured out what happened to the SRC Movano partnership, because last couple of weeks we've been seeing Movano heading on in with their old, very fetching silver and red yellow highlight paint scheme.
Well, I guess it's just a times change, I guess, over the years, and we get to see new liveries come and go, new title sponsorships come and go, which I know can be quite hard to distinguish between, and I know you have an opinion on that one from our time in Fuji. But what I do find quite interesting, as that was very close, is the interpretation of how Pearsons have painted the Cadillac. I find is quite interesting.
That's a good point, because I was just looking at it going, that does not look like the traditional Pearsons car, but there's a little bit more black on the front, on the outsides. It looks quite intimidating.
It's an angry car, and we like angry cars because angry cars are fast.
Miguel Vigo wants crashes, by the way. There's no geodesic drivers in this race to help him out. Maybe these LMP2 machines! 3 wide, up through the S's, and there's the crash Miguel Vigo was hoping for. It's Alistair Catchpole that will catch his LMP2 car, but 3 wide through the S's? Wow, incredible!
Incredible until it went wrong. It was almost inevitable that that would happen. Unfortunately, it looks like the 25 there, or the 28 I should say, has significant damage, and it's not really what you want to see, but I feel like going 3 wide up the S's is just asking for trouble.
Oh, I mean, if you make it work, you look like heroes. They didn't. Here we go. Out of the S's, out of the 90, excuse me, and up towards the S's. That yellow and black car really squeezed its way on through. Catchpole tried to give room initially. They ding-dong once, they ding-dong again, and it's Catchpole that gets the worst of it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Just a little bit of ding-dong ping-pong action, I guess you could say. But, yeah, when you're going such a high speed and cars that are so sensitive to any form of contact, it's really hard to save it in that condition. And, you couldn't really blame anyone individually in that process, in that crash, other than all of them for being in that situation.
Can we blame Miguel Vigo for asking for crashes? We talk so much about commentators' curses. That's the viewer curse, if I've ever seen one.
Well, we may be inventing a new thing here ready for tomorrow, so if you're cheering on a certain team tomorrow, perhaps you should try and curse the other team, as I'm watching the number 14 and 33 really try and hit each other.
And Alexander Delatraz, representing Cadillac Racing factory colors, sits behind and has joined the party. He's up 3 positions. Plenty of big movers, none bigger than Thomas King, by the way, who is now up 11 spots to 5th in that LMP2 class. Matt Roberts, though, is a little bit of an anchor, I would say, in that BMW. We'll see how it plays out. Pedro Sanchez-Albert heads off down pit road. Now, I didn't quite pick up what happened to Sasha Gola, but he spent 2 minutes and 30 seconds in pit lane and headed back out onto track, so maybe he hit a curb badly. This is quite early for Pedro Sanchez-Albert to have come into pit lane. I'm worried about him doing the same.
I would say we're expecting to see these cars into the pit lane on lap 22 because they tend to run that far. What it looks like on Pedro Sanchez-Albert's part that he's trying to take the short stop early on and would prefer to run in a different area of traffic. Now, something that is really more crucial than you ever could think about is in these, usually to go on the fastest race stint, you would run on the lowest fuel possible at all points in time. However, when you're racing in a multi-class race, sometimes if you know where the traffic is and where you can get clean air, as it seems to be plenty of it around Pedro Sanchez-Albert at the moment, it'll just make you run faster no matter the fuel load.
So we'll just keep our eyes on that as well. Here's George's Nader, who has reclaimed the lead for the moment. Let's have Timo Roeder right behind him in that number 5 machine. It is BMW and Cadillac once again. And even though the Cadillac was the preferred, this is a response to Pedro Sanchez-Albert, and has the 34, locks the brakes up and got a speeding penalty. Fortunately, he gets away with that. That looked like he was asking for trouble, though.
Definitely very, very aggressive on the pit entry. However, we do know in iRacing there is a little bit of leeway. We're not in real life here. You know, if you speed 2-3k over at the line, you'll get away with it. So only time will tell. He'll have to serve the penalty now if he has one. However, I think he's probably okay.
Here is Pedro Sanchez-Albert, who will wind through to retake the race lead with the Falcon liveried car still yet not rolling, actually. That's a lengthy stop. Lengthy stop. 17.4 compared to 12.9. It's a full 4 seconds longer, and the BMW bank car will handily have the lead.
That is a rather interesting time difference there, because you'd have to think there's some sort of fuel difference discrepancy, or maybe choice of tyres, because we did see the car go up, the Falcon car go up in the air, I believe.
Through traffic in this battle for what is now second spot, Will Lyon and Daniel Kraft will go side by side, and for a moment thought about going either side of the Mercedes. Kraft got boxed out because that GTD machine ran himself all the way to the outside, and Will Lyon will hold station for the time being. But this is, to your point, Will, why we saw cars coming in early. They wanted to get out of these traffic situations. They wanted to avoid another cycle through. But I guess if you haven't boxed at this point, you're committed, which is why we see Lyon and Kraft stay out.
Well, they'll no doubt have the advantage in terms of the weight of their car for this portion of the race and also towards the end. However, you must say that the time that you lose, when we think about it, you know, we watch these special event qualifyings in these GTP cars, and since day number 1, they've been so close. And just losing time like that could be absolutely detrimental.
Here we go, 3 wide up towards the bus stop. Will Lyon backs out, thinks better of it. Sometimes you need to do things like that. With 26 minutes still left to go in this race, we haven't even got through 20 minutes here. Will, it's incredible.
It's been a fantastic race so far, and I think that's part and parcel to the amount of traffic we're seeing between these 3 classes. We've actually not focused a lot on GTD, which is usually something that we would focus on a lot.
Well,
there's always a good amount of drivers in there.
Yeah,
what's your comment? Come on.
But it's just a train. Let's be real.
I know.
They're just in a choo-choo train, right? Should we call it a red line train? Is that fair?
No, because there's well, I guess if you'd say the red line's at the head of the train, yeah, sure.
I don't know train nomenclature. This is where we need to dial Paul Smith up. But I believe you would name the train based on what's pulling it, surely.
Not necessarily. It depends what type of train it is, I guess. But maybe, yeah, I guess you could say it's the red line double train at the front pulling along Taylor Barnard.
Steinbratten's not impressed. And by the way, correctly pointed out by some in our YouTube chat, Ole Steinbratten has also used a Smurf account to brew to all of the top three for not being confident enough in their own abilities to stay out of trouble. But you can see that the traffic separated out Thompson and Steinbratten slightly, and is this the chance for Barnard to slide his way on through?
Potentially, but you've got to think, if you're in Barnard's position, you're thinking about saving fuel. Your only chance really to battle past these two red line cars is probably going to be during the pit stop phase. If you can fuel a little bit less and jump one of the cars ahead of you, then you're maybe able to then make a breakaway. That would certainly be my sort of approach to this sort of battle. However, it's going to be hard to beat two teammates when they're fighting at the front and able to communicate with each other.
That's Will Lyon that spins the Iron Brew car around. Now, I got to ask your opinion on Iron Brew, Will.
It's great. Why wouldn't you like Iron Brew? Okay. Yeah, have you never tried it?
Back in the day I have. That's a long, long time ago. Last time I was in the UK, Will, was it 2010? I think it was 2010.
You could always import some in, I'm sure. I'm sure you have some UK shops. We have American shops over
I tried to import myself to the UK, and that didn't go very well. Let's take a look at what happened, though, to the somewhat controversial car, I'm sure, because you, I guess, either like Iron Brew or you don't. Is it... Ooh. That's a weird one. That's bizarre.
Just too much speed, I guess, at the end of the day, and a bit of rear locking as you start to panic late into the braking zone. Just offline. I mean, we don't have that much of an effect of marbles in iRacing. It doesn't reduce the grip too much. You can only really say that that corner in general is pretty heavily banked towards the inside, and as you fall out to the outside, the banking falls away, the camber falls away, so I guess just not able to carry the speed that was expected.
Well, Lyon heads off to pit lane, by the way. As maybe is expected after scorching some tires, even if he didn't take damage, on board with the second of your Coffin Dancers car. It's looking ominous for other entries in LMP2. I always get nervous through that third to last corner with how wide some of these drivers will get. I've had my fair share of mistakes. Just tracking out a little bit too much, kicking up a bit of grass and then spinning the car around. One question that I still haven't come to a determination on myself, Will, is I maintain that the BMW M Hybrid V8 sounds better than the BMW M4 GT3 car. We decided that on the BMW M Sim Cup. Which of the GTP cars that we have now in iRacing sounds better, though?
How can you ask that question?
I know!
How can you seriously ask that question? Really?
Well,
you don't mean that, do you?
Well, as someone who is one of the voices of the BMW M Sim Cup, I've got to make sure that I colour on the right side of the lines, you see?
I'm sorry, I will speak for all sensible race fans. The Cadillac is the best top-class sounding car ever made.
Okay, wait, well, listen.
Oh, maybe, wait, 787B. 787B.
It's a throatier sound in the BMW, I guess, is what you can say.
The driver's not boring, the driver's fantastic, but the car sounds boring.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on this one. Although I do love the story of the BMW engine where it's like, let's take the DTM engine and let's find a use for it some other way.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Why not? I suppose we're yet to really see how it stacks up in the competition around the French countryside, or likewise events, yes. But in IMSA, you know, it's been okay. Well, I'd say
BMW also had a very late start to their program relative to some of the other manufacturers, so they'll get a bit of leeway there. But yeah, next year when they head off to the WEC, I think we're going to be interested to see how they stack up. Taylor Barnard, by the way, I'm not sure if this is traffic related or if it's a small mistake here and there. Not completely out of the draft just yet, but near as makes no difference, enjoying no benefit from that at this point as Thompson and Steinbratten begin to pull away as they head off into a pit stop window.
That could be crucial for this race. I know as teammates, when you do these sorts of races, which can be heavily benefited by the tow, all you want is to break that gap to the cars behind. It makes your life so much easier, especially when you're working together. And unless there is some unfortunate GTP traffic, you would certainly put your money on Redline running away.
Not sure where this comes from, but let's see if we can spool back in time and ride on board with Taylor Barnard. So this is out of the final corner. A handful of laps ago, and you can see he's still relatively close down the hill into the 90. I mean, they're all tracking out wide, but does Taylor Barnard push just that little bit? He does. You hear him back off instantly as he tries to begin serving a slowdown.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he's trying to head for the next state, though, who's going that wide, so I wouldn't blame iRacing for giving him a slowdown, and that could be a crucial error in terms of this race. I
mean, let's be real though, Will. That's the line that people used to run on the old version of Watkins Glen, which you were doing some research, dates back to 2008, the year that iRacing first launched as a public product. That was the line that for so many years people had become accustomed to racing on.
Yeah, but we're talking about NASCARs, though, really, aren't we? Because they just kind of use the entire universe to go wide there and, track out. However, everyone knows the track limits. They're obviously trying to get an advantage through turn one to stay with each other and stay in that crucial draft. But if you're going too wide and you're abusing it too hard, you deserve the slowdown, in my opinion.
All right, so I'm going to go and look. I'm looking on the map right now. If you were really to go that wide in through, if you were going to completely miss turn number one, which direction are you actually? I think you're heading towards Canada. You are. So if you go straight at turn number one, go long enough, and you can find Canada. If you go slightly wide at turn number one, like Taylor Barnard was doing, eventually you might find your way to Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, somewhere in that area. You could talk to some of the drivers before we started about pit stops and fuel windows. Taylor Barnard comes in at the end of lap number 15. Talk us through what you've been hearing, though, in terms of fuel numbers, Will.
Fuel numbers? Oh, I'm not quite sure. In terms of GTP, I know it's going to be 22 laps on a full tank, and we'll see a 30-lap race. In GTD, I guess now is when it seems to be people are coming into the stops. I feel like these days in IMSA, you're kind of running just over half the race, and it would certainly kind of line up with this period of time. One thing I can take away, though, from Taylor Barnard running that wide and trying to enter Canada is he's clearly saying that FIA Formula 3 should go to Montreal.
I mean, I think everyone would argue that, let's be real. Taylor Barnard will leave pit lane after a 13.5 second pit stop if you wanted to get a sense for what we might expect from the red line duo when they make their way down towards pit lane. Still waiting for Timo Rohrer, Dan Kraft, Dan Drakia, and then Connor McKellen to pit inside of the top four of your GTPs, and they are coming towards the end of their expected fuel window. Meanwhile, your LMP2 leaders might have a challenge incoming from Christophe Guillaume, because Cy Andra, after his pit stop, is filtered out directly here. And I wonder if that undercut racing driver is going to be able to use this GTP traffic to just close that gap a little bit further.
Certainly would be your aim, as the undercut racing driver would be trying to just kind of close that gap. It seems sometimes desperate at times when you're outside that slipstream window. However, he's in short. He's only maybe, what's that, 1.3 back? I'm not quite sure on the number, but it's fairly close, and with the GTP kind of just sitting there, I certainly would have liked him to go up the inside into the final corner, but red line into the box.
Yeah, here we go. I think this is the lap where we'll see everyone in. End of, lap 16 for the GTDs. Where does that leave a couple of your other cars? We'll find it in a moment. There was a moment with Dan Drakia, by the way, that took out some GTD contention, potentially. I just wanted to pick up what happened in that Zekerill Esports car. Down to the inside of... Is that Taylor Barnard?
It's certainly a white car.
I think it is, because Taylor Barnard didn't... I think his livery is showing up differently across of our two different machines. He's going to be nowhere close as a result. He's back on pit lane. He's done for the day.
That's a disaster there for Barnard. I mean, he must have got some sort of suspension damage, but it looked like such a small contact and such a big consequence.
We're using trading paints today, for those wondering. RaceSpot.media, final chance to get your paints uploaded for tomorrow's 6 Hours of the Glen presented by VCO. Just make sure I slide that in there, Will. You see, if they've been bad and they haven't submitted it yet, I'm giving them one more chance.
One more chance may be what they need, but certainly you must upload your paints to RaceSpotTV if you think you have any chance of getting in the top split tomorrow. But I do imagine it will be quite hotly contested. You know, I'm listening to teams across the iRacing landscape, and people think it's going to be really high iRating for some of these soft cutoffs.
So we're talking, what, 17 probably cars per class-ish, 17 times 3 being 51. So one class is going to get the short end of the stick. It's what, 5.1k SOF minimum today for this Friday night preview. I would not be shocked if we see at the start of tomorrow's race minimum 8k, minimum 8.5.
I think 8 to 8.5 is kind of what the teams are expecting. Of course, a lot of these teams produce sheets, data sheets across what they expect entries to be to try and have a look at this. But we're watching a bit of a flick spin for Matthew Gerard, who looks to have had an issue at the hairpin.
That's someone that's got their traction control off button mapped because he was able to spin it back around, and it was that 34 Falcon liveried car tried to get down the inside, and an LMP2 mixed up as well. But there's that spin around. Quick thinking. Love to see it.
That's something that really excites you, isn't it? You really like the whole TC off button thing. I feel like you're always. It's so pent up in your mind that people don't have it mapped.
Do you have it mapped, Will?
No.
So what happens when you spin?
Them up to 5 million degrees.
Yes, no, it's not ideal, but you want to get going in a straight line. That's the name of the game, right? Racing is about moving in a straight line. So as little time spinning as possible is ideal. Timo Roeder, by the way, is going to head off to pit lane, as will the LMP2 field in their entirety. And so this is where we'll see if there is going to be potentially some drafting battles to play themselves out in these final 12 and a bit minutes, or if the Coffin Dancer duos at the front will be able to continue to break away.
You would certainly think that the Undercut Sim Racing driver is the only one that can challenge our dancing duo, so I guess it's all going to come down to how long he spends in the box. And to be honest, looking back in the pit lane, it looks like it might be a little bit far initially for Christopher Wyme.
I think I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be too much of a challenge. Where will Timo Roeder fare out, though? Right behind Pedro Sanchez Albert. We will see fighting for the GTP lead after a slightly shorter stop for Pedro Sanchez Albert. I think he's been saving a bit of fuel. He will now have a Cadillac to contend with. It's BMW against its new rival here in the GTP.
Fresh off a 24-hour podium, Cadillac Racing's new car is going to have a chance to get a win here against a veteran of the sim racing industry, you must say. And it's going to be interesting to see if the Red Bull livery does in fact always win.
Does it give you wings? I guess that's really the question. Now, I will point out that Pedro Sanchez Albert has been one of the quickest drivers not in a Urano car to adapt to this car. First at VCO Pro Sim Infinity, where he got the pole position. I think it was at Daytona to start things off. But then even in the 24 Hours of Daytona, things like that, we've seen the speed that this Spaniard has brought over to BS competition. Of course, now in the BMW Bank colors for today. I'm going to be watching to try and figure out where each car is quick, where they're developing speed, because with the lights flashing from behind, there'll be some mental warfare for sure, but what does each car offer its driver?
I'm sure Sanchez Albert caught the rear there. It's interesting, really, because we don't really have enough knowledge yet. This car's only been out for a short period of time, but enough talking about that, because it looks like we're going to have a challenge for the lead here.
To the outside pops the Cadillac. Will they brave the bumps at the bus stop? Pedro Sanchez Albert says no thank you. He's been tangled up there in some open wheel machinery before here on RaceSpotTV. Decides he's got 10 more minutes to figure things out and potentially more traffic to work their way on through.
Yeah, as you can see, a few GTDs coming up in the distance could certainly be another telling factor in this ever-changing story. We've seen Albert make such a good move earlier on in the race, if you hark your mind back to 30 minutes ago when the traffic just parted the seas to make that move for the lead, but he's going to have to do that again, and the gap's only opening up across the course of the boot section.
We will officially hit that 10-minute to go mark. Like Will mentioned, it is going to be a 30-lap race. 23 will be complete this time at the line, and the margin at the front going to be close to a full second as the Cadillac streaks away with potentially some slightly fresher tires after just rolling off of pit lane. It's a 1 second gap in two of our classes. The Coffin Dancer duo split up slightly. Hilario in front of Hattinen, still the 7 leading the 8, but meanwhile, after Taylor Barnard came across some trouble, red line still at the front. It's not Josh White, it's Bosch Thompson. It is Ole Steinbraten, though, that's in behind. Are we going to see a red line BMW battle to the end here?
Well, I don't see why they wouldn't fight each other. It's more a case, can Steinbraten close up? There's a lot of traffic around them at the moment, and it would certainly not be helping, well, either of them, I guess. You don't really want to be inundated with traffic like they are at the moment, and I don't know what's happened there.
That was Tomoki Hirose who went around. He got passed by Ribolo as a result of what happened there, but Watkins Glen never disappoints in terms of action.
Certainly could have been some contact, I'm thinking, between maybe him and Thompson, and if not, it's certainly a scary moment for Thompson at the head of your field. You're watching a replay here and just by yourself, and very well avoided by Thompson, to be honest.
I think we need to try and get a look from up above. You'll just be able to see that rear end steps. Josh
That's
Thompson,
mighty close.
Josh Thompson, take a breath now.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to see, and expertly avoided. It's almost like just follow your line, never watch the car. You were always taught that as a kid in karting. You know, if someone's crashing in front of you, just follow your line. The car's probably going to slide out the way like it did, and it saved Thompson here at the head of your field.
There's no damage on that car either, I'm pretty sure. Have we talked about the curb at the bus stop yet, Will, today?
We've not really talked about it. We mentioned there's been some interesting bump situations from the GTP class and also LMP2s, but we've not really talked about it in length, no.
So I think that's probably a good thing, because I've commentated on some series over the past year or so where, since this track was released, about 14, 15 months ago, where a lot of series have elected not to run the bus stop because of how dangerous it can tend to be with some of the lines and how stiffly sprung some of the setups tend to be. I'm glad we haven't had to talk too much about that, although we do now get to talk about the fact that we've got a fight for third with Daniel Kraft and Georges Nader going back and forth. The Pearson's car up to third.
Yeah, well, it's another Cadillac versus BMW battle. The Falcon car is going to look to make his way through onto the podium positions with just 6 minutes 50 to go. You can see an onboard camera from the bottom right getting kind of a driver's eye angle almost of how this circuit looks for the drivers. You see, as they straighten up these exits, these GTP cars have so much power. It's so important to make sure you're getting that traction down on the exit and you're not really getting into the traction control too much. There's not much chances for passes later in this lap, but you really are entering your time to pass in the first section.
I think one thing that in these cars I'm curious what the drivers will be saying is, as that was a big bobble on the curve for the BMW, is the fact that the way that the hybrid deploys has changed in that BMW. And so for the drivers that have stuck with the car, elected to build a setup based off what used to work, what changes have they had to make there? What changes have they made in their driving to not only maybe work on how they regenerate energy under braking, but also in how they deploy it, how they choose to use it, and what does that mean as we head into a much longer race? Of note, as they fight for third, Pedro Sanchez Albert being quite, I'll say, smart through traffic as he elects not to get into trouble. I think this is fuel saving. 12.9 seconds is by far the shortest pit stop in the GTP class, and I'm just wondering if he's kept himself a little bit too short.
It was certainly an interesting thing to see how short he went in terms of the time, and usually that always comes down to fuel unless there's some interesting tyre strategies. I would certainly suggest that Sanchez Albert's tyres are maybe not in as good a condition, but to be honest, it looks a bit like just a consolidation drive now. I feel like Sanchez Albert has accepted the fact that he's just not going to be able to beat Timo in front, and yeah, interesting to note.
Well, here we go back to third then, where I guess really the only fight that we're going to get to watch, unless the Coffin Dancers, at least for a lead, unless the Coffin Dancers elect to try and figure out who goes in what coffin. Yeah, no,
yeah?
I'm going to have to workshop some puns with ChatGPT before we head out racing tomorrow. Half squeeze there by Daniel Croft. We will get side by side into the chicane, but the Pearson's car backs out of it enough. But with more momentum, Falcon getting a little bit loose, a little bit slippery, just about holding on. They get through side by side cleanly.
Got a feeling this won't be the end of that. 4 minutes to go. I certainly wouldn't say there's a massive pace delta between the two of them. And, you always want to go for that podium position if you've got chance. And as you watch them through the boot section for the 25th time or something like that?
27th time.
27th, wow, look how fast time flies. I just don't think that's the end we'll see of it. I still think we're going to see a few positions change.
I think they'll get 3 more laps with which to play with because of where your leader Timo Rohde sits after pitting late. That has seemed to be a quite good strategy. We thought that boxing early, getting out of traffic might play quite nicely, but Daniel Croft getting checked up behind some traffic through that penultimate corner. He didn't push the issue there. Good to see the respect being shown, but he instantly loses 1.9 seconds and is closer to Matthew Roberts in the recovering BMW that very much seems to have its pace back about it. Trying to work its way on forward once again. Pass between two very similarly liveried cars, Fury and Cobra Stein, 8th and 9th in the LMP2 class. This is what I sometimes say when people need to help us out as commentators. If you look from the back, they look identical.
Yeah, well, there's always a lot of liveries that end up looking the same, and that's why I would make my case to say that the Altus Esports livery is by far the best one.
Unfortunately, it doesn't protect against internet disconnects. Here we go between the red line counterparts, though. It's Thompson and Steinbraten through the toe, now up towards the heel of the boot, with Thompson covering the inside. Pedro Sanchez Albert electing not to force the 3-wide situation. Steinbraten holds strong for the time being, but realistically, I don't think you want to lead going to see the white flag. You want to be in second and getting that toe.
I don't know, there's always that kind of do you not. It's not quite Daytona. There is obviously a significant toe as you head down to the inner loop, but you've got to say, from a leading position, you are in control. You are able to choose your own destiny to an extent. And I would certainly say that Thompson, I think, would want to lead if he can just open up that gap enough, but there surely will be a challenge down into the bus stop.
I keep forgetting that we've updated the draft very slightly. Although, how could I forget, based on some of the complaining on social media? 3/4 the margin as they crest the top of the hill. That's surely not going to be close enough. And what we need to do here on iRacing is add hybrid to the GTDs, Bill. That's what we need to do.
Hybrid? On
I'm just trying to say the most controversial thing that I can say. Is that the most controversial thing I can say?
Other than the BMW sounding better than the Cadillac, yes.
I don't think I technically ever said that. I just implied that. Maybe I did.
Yeah. Well, we've got a battle for the lead.
Oh, an opportunity as well for Steinbraten, because as Matthew Roberts works on past, he popped to the inside. Thompson looks like he's driving defensive. These two are just trying to figure out what they can do in terms of defense and how much they can push.
Yeah, and it's always going to be interesting between teammates, especially on Smurf accounts, because I've got no doubt they'll be in VC together, so you perhaps could see some harder racing than you normally would between two people in a public server at least. But as you see the BMW sniff, the white flag flies.
So they will be coming to take the white flag as Timo Roeder is already headed off up towards the climb through the S's. Another opportunity maybe for Steinbratton as Thompson runs a little bit wide. He'll set it up out of this final corner, because if we're thinking on the same page that you do not want to be second heading out of the 90, the impetus must come now. Outside for Steinbratton as Thompson pinches himself. And if Steinbratton can hold himself without getting a slowdown, surely he'll get the momentum. Thompson made his life as difficult as possible. Let's see what will happen.
Yeah, up through the S's section, they are nose to tail here. Steinbratton versus Thompson, usually teammates but enemies on this final lap. They're going to run wheel to wheel, almost banging into the inner loop section. It's going to be Thompson versus Steinbratton side by side. Are they going to make contact? A little bit of grass hugging, and they're still side by side.
Beautifully done, though, to show each other respect, to give each other the room needed. Slow Matthew Roberts still scrambling his way on through after his big crash through the bus stop. But after such respect, Steinbratton finally grabs the point. And what a move it was. Yes, the teammates will battle to the end, but while they do so, we've got to head up towards your race leader, because Timo Roeder waited and waited and waited until he came down to pit lane and sprung the surprise on Pedro Sanchez Albert. He wins the Friday night preview as we build up to a big weekend in Watkins Glen. Great drive from the prototype machine and immediately heads off back to pit lane, maybe a little bit short on fuel. We'll get to see coffin dancers across the line in a few moments' time as well, but red line 1 and 2 set the tone for what they'll expect tomorrow in a 6-hour sprint.
Fantastic battle we saw at the end there between the two red line drivers. You would certainly say it was a good battle between them and very respectful. They'll be looking to continue that tomorrow. Coffin dancers across the line to claim a 1-2, another dangerous warning to the competition tomorrow.
Elayo grabs the victory, and in the end they managed to gap the rest of the field as well, so ominous signs, that is for sure. Seems like some slow cars to the line, maybe cutting it a bit close in terms of fuel. One thing that I will point out is cool day, Will. I don't think this is what we're going to be expecting tomorrow when we return to Watkins Glen.
Yeah, it's going to clearly be different tomorrow, but there's certain signs that people are very, very prepared. Do not get this wrong. These drivers have practiced day and night to get ready for this competition, but we do expect to see hotter temperatures tomorrow, especially in the middle of the day, and that could certainly change up the strategy.
I hope they haven't been practicing at night, because it's only 6 hours. We're not going to be seeing any nighttime running. Final cars will work their way to the line. Matthew Roberts there, unfortunately, will not see the checkered flag. We do actually have to wait for another car who's missing a rear wing. There's always drama.
It's a Peugeot 9X8.
That's what I was just thinking.
It's a Peugeot. Oh, fantastic to see it into iRacing so soon.
It's a pretty good cosplay of one, that's for sure. Let's see if we can figure out what happened to A, this Cadillac, and to B, the BMW of Matthew Roberts, because I wonder if there was some contact for Roberts. That's what happens when you don't have any rear downforce. Here's the replay. Oh, was there contact?
Yeah, I definitely think there must have been. That is a big hit on the barrier. We're watching again a very aggressive defensive line, and
I don't think there is.
I don't know. Is it? Maybe. Oh, it's the bumps, isn't it? It's going to be the bumps.
I'm pretty sure it is. What happens, by the way? Oh, this is after he's already lost the rear wing, I'm pretty sure. He's still trying. I got to give him credit. Oh, I think maybe he thought he was done, but he wasn't. He will come across the line and get us some official race results. Friday night preview, always a great opportunity for us to let off some steam and the drivers get out there and put on a show for us. Timo Roeder gains 3 positions through his strategy masterclass. Enduring the traffic maybe was the surprising call, but it worked a treat for him, while Pedro Sanchez Albert drops back after needing to save some fuel. George's Nader, after putting it on pole, ends up 3rd in front of Daniel Croft, for Pearson, who's up to 4th. Alexander Delatraz climbed 7 spots on his rise up to 5th in front of Norbert Tamish, Conor McKellen, Thomas Mazenier, and then Matthias Penteler and Cy Andra, the rest of your top 10 in class. Just 3 more finishers on the lead lap. Dan Drake here, Julian Ribolo, and then Matthew Roberts. We saw the Peugeot of Tomoki Hirose cross the line in front of the technically non-finishers of Will Lyon, Michael de Turk, who was involved in that tangle up through the S's, and then Thibaut Prévost in the Arnage competition car. Over to LMP2, where it's a Coffin Dancers 1 and 2 dancing their way through the field. In front of Christoph Wame in the undercut racing machine. In front of Kuba Kowalski, Thomas King, Niels van Handel, Lucas Juritz, Thomas Ferrari, Jonas Koberstein, and Martin Hart-Riesel. That's the top 10 in the Dallara LMP2 spec class, effectively. The second of the Hart-Riesels, 11th, Sasha Gorla. Not sure what happened to him. We'll try and figure that out heading off in tomorrow's 6 hours event. But he's still classified as a finisher in front of Adam Stay, Aaron Vasquez, Alistair Catchpole, and then Raphael Ristolin. One final class, last but not least, GTD's Redline 1-2 with Steinbraten beating White on that final lap of the race. BMW's looking strong, but Ferrari third, represented by Felix Voter in front of the 992 Porsche 911 GT3R of Fabio Unverdrus. Then behind there, Matteo Girard, Daniel Morphy, Philip Helrold, and then Vil Ivanin, Marcin Gadinsky, and then Andre Heinrich, the rest of the top 10. Just 2 more finishers before you head into those that had a bit more struggles. Taylor Barnard, the most significant of those, might have been able to challenge the Redline duo at the front, but contact with a GTP machine meant it was not to be on the other side of a pit stop. So, don't know if we're necessarily going to get the opportunity to chat to any of our drivers, but we'll stick around and give them a few moments to join us here live on RaceSpotTV. In the meantime, why don't we take a look at Will Chadwick, what the viewers have as options for Friday Night Primetime Week 2. We had to slightly scramble to put together Friday Night Preview. It's totally not mine and Hugo's fault. However, the poll will go live in just a few moments' time. 4 intriguing options, 2 which take us over to the Brickyard, 1 which sees us return to Watkins Glen, and 1 which sees us get a little bit dirty.
Yeah, some interesting options there for you to choose from next week. It's going to be your choice, so it's a bit of a fixed kind of roster as we've come up with. So we've got some prototype machinery, some NASCAR stuff, which I have no idea about, so I'm not sure I'm going to commentate on that. But it's your choice, and that's the beauty of it.
That is the beauty of it, and every single week we'll be able to get your voices out there and heard here live on Friday Night Primetime as we work our way through the iRacing community. It's always fun to be able to see familiar faces join us for the journey as well. Let's not forget that we're going to return to Watkins Glen for the 6 hours. We've seen this POP in effect already today. A little bit of a glimpse of what to expect. Will Chadwick, you're not a fan of the event as a driver, apparently, so it's probably a good thing that you're not in the Altus LMP2 contingent that will be looking to grab victory. Who do you think's going to come out on top, though? Because let's not forget that fans and viewers can head to RaceSpot's Discord and to Twitter to join us in RaceSpot Predictor and see who can be the most mystic.
Well, my predictions are already in the sheet, so I'll put them out here. The 20 red line, or the number 20 red line of, I believe, Pinto and Lulham to win in GTP. Bit controversial, maybe you would say Hoffman and, well, whoever else drives with him, I guess, in Urano. In LMP2, I'm going to have to back the Altus boys. I'd probably say Nunez and Vasquez if they're together. I'm actually not sure of the lineup, to be completely honest. And in GTD, why not back Redline again? Ole and Thompson may be driving together, and they certainly look fast today.
It's Ole, Steinbraten, Thompson, and Vecchio, if I remember correctly. Because quite interestingly, 6-hour race, they're bringing 3 drivers.
I know why that is, actually. I can give you an exclusive. It's because Tom Burns' internet has shunted itself this week. So they're having to switch to 3 because they've already done prep for it.
Well, there's one of our talking points for tomorrow already written. And of course, we bring so many talking points out of this Friday Night Primetime, Friday Night Preview special event. Don't forget racespot.wtf/Discord. You can not just be heard in terms of where we will be, what cars will be broadcasting for Friday Night Primetime 7 days from today, but you can join us for RaceSpot Predictor. Win a RaceSpot jersey if you turn out to be the most mystic of us all for what's bound to be a very special third VCO Grand Slam of the year. That and every special event live and exclusive on RaceSpotTV and the iRacing Esports Network. We'll see you back here in Watkins, Glen for more fantastic racing action. For now, on behalf of Will Chadwick and myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time for Friday Night Primetime.